All right, hello everyone, and welcome to The Current, the North Central Region Water Network Speed Networking webinar series. My name is Ann Nardi. I am the Marketing and Communications Specialist for the North Central Region Water Network, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today we're going to be talking about One Water partnerships, innovative, inclusive, and integrated approaches to water resource management. For those of you who might not be familiar with the One Water concept, One Water is a term that was coined by our partners at the U.S. Water Alliance, and it refers to the concept that all water has value, whether that is storm water, gray water, source water, or drinking water. And with all of these water components interconnected, we need a diversity of voices and a diversity of interests involved to address these complex water resource challenges. So I'm excited to be bringing you 3 examples of One Water partnerships at work within the region. Before we get started, a little bit of an overview for those of you who may be new to the network. The North Central Region Water Network is a 12 state land-grant university partnership that is working to enhance connectivity and learning and share the latest water-related research and knowledge, and coordinating multi-state initiatives that address water issues to generate measurable impacts. And we're going to be sharing, one of our speakers is a newly funded network initiative to be sharing with you today. So before we get started, just a few housekeeping items for you. You can submit your questions for the presenters via the chat box. You can access the chat box via the purple Collaborate panel in the lower left, or excuse me, the lower right-hand corner of your webinar screen. We will have our 3 presenters speak, and then we'll have a dedicated Q&A session following that. So please list your questions in there for the presenters, and we'll be sure to ask our presenters after all 3 have presented. If you are having issues with your computer audio, there is a phone-in option available, and that can be accessed by opening the session menu in the upper left-hand area of your webinar screen, and then selecting Use Your Phone for Audio. This session is being recorded, and we will post this webinar as well as all of the current webinars at the North Central Water website, northcentralwater.org. And we will also be sharing it on eExtension for our eExtension partners. So getting started, I want to overview our 3 speakers for today. We have Lorraine Winters-Krzeski, the Watershed Manager with the Department of Public Utilities out of the City of Columbus. Michael Kuntz with the Utilities Environmental Manager out of the City of Cedar Rapids, so 2 different municipalities sharing their partnership endeavors. And Deborah Bathke, the Research Associate Professor out of the University of Nebraska-Lincoln and the National Drought Mitigation Center, who's going to be talking about drought scenario planning and a new initiative funded by the network. You feel free to follow along on Twitter. For our Twitter handle is NorthCentralH2O and the hashtag #TheCurrent for live tweets and updates to join the conversation. So first up today, we're going to be hearing from Lorraine. Lorraine's bio is up on the screen, and I won't read the whole thing, but Lorraine is the Watershed Manager for the Columbus Division of Water. And we've worked with Lorraine on a couple different areas with her work in watershed management and working with the Upper Scioto River. So excited for her to be here today and tell us a little bit about her projects. Lorraine, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Ann. As Ann said, my name is Lorraine Krzeski, and I'm the Watershed Manager for the City of Columbus, Ohio, Division of Water. Here in Columbus, we've been taking a collaborative approach to source water protection for over 20 years. Today, I'm going to be talking about some of the programs and strategies we've used to target reductions in atrazine, nutrients, and other contaminants that present a concern for the water supply. To begin, I'll provide a brief overview of Columbus's drinking water system. The Columbus Division of Water is a public water utility which serves a population of 1.2 million in the greater Columbus area. In 2018, we produced nearly 49 billion gallons of drinking water with an average production of around 133.7 million gallons per day. We have 3 water treatment plants, and 85% of the water we treat comes from surface water sources, which are open rivers or reservoirs, as opposed to groundwater. Here you can see the relative location of our watersheds in relation to the City of Columbus boundary, which is outlined in black. Zooming into that area, it's important to note that the watersheds which supply water for Columbus are located primarily outside of our corporate limits. The watersheds cover 13 counties, and unlike some water systems, Columbus owns very little land in the watershed, mostly just the perimeter of land surrounding the reservoirs and a few conservation easements. In order to protect the source waters for Columbus, we need to understand the activities occurring within the watersheds and how each of those activities impacts the quality and amount of point and non-point pollutants entering our source water. By the time water reaches the reservoirs, it's too late to make a big difference in water quality, which is why we look upstream and seek to collaborate within the watershed area. In 2016, we completed a watershed master plan, which helped us to identify and prioritize the near and long-term risks to our water sources. This map shows the characterization of our two main watersheds, and you can see how they differ. The land use in each watershed is still primarily agricultural. However, as Columbus and surrounding communities grow, we are looking at the influences of urban and rural land use. Some recent challenges faced by Columbus include issues attributable to nutrients. For drinking water utilities, nutrients can present direct problems, such as nitrate exceedances, which can cause health issues, as well as indirect issues, such as algal blooms and taste and odor, which are more aesthetic issues. We're also concerned about the impact of sediment accumulating in our reservoirs, which, over time, is going to reduce our storage volume. Water quality issues are very much in the news in Ohio, ranging from the national news out of Toledo and the Lake Erie nutrient issues, to local news and cartoons when we have had nitrate problems in the past. Luckily, we feel and we hope our nitrate concerns here in Columbus may be behind us thanks to recent installation of ion exchange technology. However, that technology, which we've installed at our water treatment plants, is very expensive to install and expensive to operate, and it's not something that every water utility can afford. For us, the treatment technology is only one piece of the solution. Columbus also uses a very active water quality monitoring program and a watershed management program to both identify and monitor water quality concerns and take steps to minimize their impact. In our experience, a watershed-focused approach can save money in treatment costs and provide for healthier reservoirs, which for us are a very valuable community asset. So in looking to address water quality problems, the local water utility is definitely a stakeholder who can also contribute resources, ideas, and information to help with the solution. So for those listening today, I would encourage you, if you haven't already, to contact the local water supplier when looking for partners in collaborative approaches. One important resource that many water and wastewater utilities already hold is historical and current water quality data, which can be useful in understanding where and when nutrient issues are occurring. The collection of this data is also an in-kind service that can be counted when applying for many grant programs. So these next few slides just kind of show how our water quality monitoring system is set up here in Columbus with both grab samples and in-stream monitoring that provides a continuous monitoring. And we use this as a predictive tool to understand when we're going to have a problem. But again, this represents a repository of data that's very valuable in understanding where geographically we want to focus our efforts. And we're always happy to share this and collaborate with other researchers who are also collecting water quality data. And here in Columbus, we've done a lot of data sharing with Ohio State University and the Agricultural Research Service. So depending on the technology available at the treatment plants, for some water utilities, it may also be less expensive to financially support BMPs upstream, such as filter strips, wetlands, and edge of field drainage management in order to reduce those pollutant loads. So when we're thinking about the reasons why as a water utility we want to become more involved in our watershed, there are many drivers. And this slide kind of goes over some of those drivers and how each one of those we can turn into an opportunity. So to begin, we've had a lot of changes in drinking water treatment and regulations. drinking water treatment has evolved, both technology-wise to match some of the new concerns, whether that's cryptosporidium or whether that's the algal blooms that we seem to be experiencing and the associated toxins that are now presenting issues both from a recreational standpoint and a drinking water standpoint. So as the EPA, which regulates our public water systems and private water systems, as they respond through their regulations, we have found that many of the solutions are expensive to install and expensive to operate. So that, for some utilities, really helps justify why, when it's possible to make investments upstream to keep some of those nutrients that can lead to the algal issues, to keep those at a minimal level, it may be more cost effective to fund, whether that's a filter strip or a grass waterway, to keep those out of the reservoirs and the water systems to begin with. The algal bloom monitoring and the taste and odor concerns that many people actually experience, this is how they become aware that there's algae in the water. If they're not a regular swimmer, if they can taste that musty odor in their water, they will call, and they will call the water utility and say, my water tastes funny. And that's not a good thing. From a public relations standpoint, that doesn't exactly bolster confidence in your quality of your drinking water. Even though those are aesthetic issues, the water is totally safe to drink. It's really not pleasant to drink water that tastes funny. So because of this happening, we see more people aware of the importance of water quality and protecting water quality. So it's almost like a strike while the iron's hot type of an opportunity we have here, with the fact that the water quality issues are so prevalent in the news. So timing-wise, it's good to get involved and good to reach out to your water utility as a potential partner. We're also seeing, as I'm sure you're experiencing in many of your communities, a lot of development around Columbus. I think we're one of the third largest or fastest growing cities right now. So a lot of our former farmland is now turning into impervious surface, and that's a good time to work with developers. So we wanted to stress that it's not just the ag community that we're partnering with, but we're also providing outreach and assistance and really targeting all of the activities within our watershed. So that's the development community, it's the residential properties in and around our reservoirs, and the businesses located immediately upstream. We do have some industry upstream of our water intakes. So one of the programs we've started recently is going around and visiting all of those businesses in an effort to protect our source water intakes and letting them know where they're located in relationship to the water plant intake, who to call if they were to have a problem, and just what they could do as far as housekeeping and stormwater BMPs to help prevent and recognize spills and report them quickly. So we're not sure if there's going to be more regulatory drivers coming down the pike that may help us, I guess, in developing programs to reduce runoff. So we're just kind of taking a little bit of a wait and see option there. Another factor is climate change and precipitation patterns that we're seeing impact our farming operations, how much inflow we're actually getting into the reservoirs. And to address that, we're really taking a 50-year outlook, and we've done some studies here locally that have supported the need to partner regionally and not just look at this as a Columbus issue, but an issue that we have to work within the watersheds in order to share and prioritize, share resources and prioritize solutions. And this definitely underscores the one water or one watershed focused approach to managing water quality, is that we really need a systems thinking. So to talk specifically about some of the ways that we've worked within the watershed, specifically the agricultural community, our involvement really goes back to 1996 when Columbus and our reservoirs were facing kind of an atrazine crisis. We had a overabundance of atrazine in our water, and it was above the MCL, or maximum contaminant level, that the EPA sets for a water utility, and we didn't really have the technology to remove it. So this became a crisis. Like, what do we do now? We have atrazine in our water supply, it's in our reservoir. How are we going to work to get it out? So we realized that it was going to be most beneficial to target, and where's the atrazine coming from? Who's applying, when are they applying it, why are they applying it? So that's what served as the impetus to begin conversations with farmers within our watershed, as well as the local soil and water conservation districts. They really were the key agency to help us open the door to discussions about our challenges, and then to understand from the agricultural perspective, how important atrazine was as a chemical for farming. And together we realized that, if we could somehow maybe pay for an alternative chemical that might cost a little bit more, or incentivize a farmer to apply that chemical further from the stream than the label, and so instead of a 66-foot setback, a 100-foot setback, we could possibly reduce that level of atrazine showing up in our reservoirs. And over a period of years and working through some grant programs, we were successful in reducing atrazine. And because of that, I think because we led off with a very successful program, it seems to have kind of greased the wheel to continue that collaborative approach, working with the SWCDs and the FSA and NRCS and Ohio State University to say, we have a lot of people that are really interested in working in this watershed. And we have people that want to research, and we have a major important driver to protect a water supply for a large city like Columbus. So with all those things and the committed folks that helped prepare the grant applications, over the years we have received PrEP awards, EQIP grants, RCPP grants. Actually, we just are closing out our first one of those and preparing to do a second one. We don't know exactly what we're going to do yet, but we're in a lot of conversations to try and figure out where the needs are. We do offer some ability to purchase conservation easements. And what I'm seeing now is more talk across the state between different cities and between both the water utility and the wastewater utility coming together and saying, how can we help support this? What we would like a seat at the table to begin discussing the solutions and sharing what resources we might be able to share to help identify where our opportunities lie. So me personally, I'm finding more opportunity and reason to get involved statewide, but we're continuing to have conversations even when we don't have an active program. We're preparing for one. One of the things I like to say is opportunity favors the prepared minds. So within our watershed areas, within this Upper Big Walnut partnership, which we have formed with the local farmers and the Franklin and Delaware SWCDs, we're always talking about what should be our next application. Where's the next need? How do we keep people coming to the table and discussing water quality here? So we see the benefits of this involvement in our watershed as a way to sustain the resource, to share the water quality data that we have, to have the opportunity to educate so people have a better understanding of the challenges. It's important for us to share the challenges that we as a water utility face, but we also want to know how prospective regulation or rules that are being proposed might impact the farmers and others who are our stakeholders. Cost sharing and grant eligibility is definitely a driver. We know we have a lot of historical data that can inform decisions from a science perspective. And at the end of the day, we really want to build a trusting relationship so that we know that we can call upon each other when it comes to putting these solutions together. So with that, I think we'll pass it on to the next speaker, but I'll be available here at the end for questions.
Thank you, Lorraine. I appreciate you joining us today and telling us everyone a little bit about your work in Columbus. Our next speaker, we're going to be jumping over to Iowa, and our next speaker is Michael Kuntz out of the city of Cedar Rapids. Michael is the Utilities Environmental Manager and has been with the city for a long time. I'll let you read his bio here, but he's going to be talking to us a little bit about the Middle Cedar Partnership Program in Cedar Rapids. So, Michael, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. Appreciate the opportunity to present what we're doing here in Cedar Rapids. My name is Mike Kuntz. I work with the Utilities Department. And so what is utilities? Well, in Cedar Rapids, if you drink it, flush it, throw it away, recycle it, or compost it. There's 250 people in the utilities department that take care of those tasks. Next slide, please. Some basic information about Cedar Rapids. We're the second largest city in Iowa with a population of over 130,000, and there are more than 180,000 residents in our metro area that we serve. We have more than 53,000 water accounts, 48,000 sewer accounts, and over 42,000 solid waste accounts. Next. No story about our city is complete without discussing the flood of 2008. It was a devastating event, $5 billion in damages, 1,500 homes lost, destroyed, permanently gone, and businesses as well. And so the city has done a lot of work since the flood to rebuild, to move things out of water's harm's way, and to start the process of building flood protection. Next. Another concern that we have in Cedar Rapids is nitrate. This is a busy slide. Apologize for that, but the blue line is a line where we've been monitoring the nitrate level in the Cedar River for a number of years, and the blue line represents those samples, and then the orange and the yellow lines represent our two water plants. We have two water plants in our metro area that draw water from alluvial aquifers along the river. So those river nitrate levels do impact our source water. We get some benefit of the filtering through the alluvium, but we are seeing the main thing I like to point out on this slide is that you see a black line running through the data, and it's slightly rising from left to right. So over time, we're seeing an increase in the nitrate in both river and in our source water. So that's causes us some concern. Next slide. So what are we doing? First, what are we doing about the two main things that we see as threats are flood, quantity of water, and then the nitrate for our source water. So what are we doing? We're taking a watershed scale approach with our thinking and our action. Highlighted here are the watersheds participating in the Mississippi River Basin Healthy Watershed Initiative. Watershed level management brings together regional partners from within and beyond the water sector in joint planning and collaborative action to protect water. Next slide. We're focusing in a little bit. In Iowa, we have 23 watershed management authorities, and they have the authority to conduct planning, assess reduce flood risk, assess and improve water quality, leverage funding sources based on federal and state programs, and facilitate education and stakeholder involvement in stormwater. These watershed management authorities open up opportunities for project funding within the state of Iowa, and the city of Cedar Rapids is actively engaged in a few of the areas on the map. I think you can see those okay, but number 7 on the map we're involved with, that's the Indian Creek Watershed Management Authority. Number 8 on the map is the Lower Cedar Watershed Management Authority. And our primary focus, of course, is the watershed just directly above our city, number 11, which is the Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority. Next slide. We're focusing in a little more tighter. This is the Middle Cedar Watershed Management Authority, outlined in the black line in that center of the map. You see the star, that's Cedar Rapids down there on the lower right. And this watershed is roughly 2,400 square miles, give or take. This watershed management authority was formed in 2016 and has 26 membership authorities. And the project I want to talk about today is highlighted in the purple and the blue there in the center. Those are 5 HUC 12, where we have our Middle Cedar Partnership Program going on. Next slide. What makes it possible to be involved in a project like this? It's all kinds of partners. Partners are a big, big deal. In 2014, the Farm Bill made it possible for municipalities and other government agencies to team with, partner with other ag groups, private landowners, to leverage for funding to projects on the landscape, on private fields. So Cedar Rapids took advantage of that. And we'll talk about that on the next slide. But I wanted to say that the watershed authorities or projects need diverse partners from government, commodity groups, and nonprofits in order to be successful. We want to thank Iowa Soybean Association for their support of our Middle Cedar Partnership Program. They helped us navigate the language of agriculture. We know a lot about, as a city, we know a lot about producing and treating water, but the assistance of Iowa Soybean Association has been invaluable in helping us navigate this journey with all of our project partners. Next. And the next slide illustrates the power of partnership. The city took the initiative and with some help here and applied for the grant in 2014 to RCPP, and we pledged just under $300,000 in-kind donations, some cash, and some monitoring. So with that project, all the partners were able to leverage a tremendous amount of funds for our investment to the tune of almost $4.3 million. And we're in year 4 of a 5-year project. And like Lorraine was saying, we too are looking at what's next. And the idea here is that the money, a huge majority of that money, is going directly to farmers for reimbursable practices on the field. The next slide. So what does implementation look like? What are we talking about for practices? Well, on the landscape there in that 5-12 region, we're focused on nutrient management plans, conservation planning for the individual landowner, and then these other items you see on the slide. The pictures indicate one of them there on the left is the installation of wood chips in a bioreactor, and then there's a picture there of a field day and more construction of bioreactors and biosplits. Next slide. What does the implementation look like by the numbers? This is where we're at today, 4 years into a 5-year project, and that center bullet there we're proud of. We think that indicates tremendous success, and that is that there is, to add up all of the acres that have some sort of a practice on it, that's around 24,000 acres, and 24,000 out of the 135,000 or so acres involved in the 5-12 represents around 18% of the row crop fields in that watershed have had some sort of impact with practice. So we're very happy about that. We think that's a great success. But then we also have the challenge from Iowa State and others that say, hey, to make a difference in the Cedar River, you're going to need to cover 75% of the landmass area. So, there's our challenge moving forward. How do we grow it? Next slide. So what are we finding? One of the aspects of our project is one of our contributions was monitoring. So we've coupled with Coe College and Iowa Soybean Association, and we're doing monitoring. And you can see here in 2017, the map on the left and then the map on the right, 2018. Looks great, right? Well, there's a lot of things that have a factor about what nitrate levels are at different monitoring locations. We have over 50 monitoring sites, and in 2017, we took snapshots, 2 distinct sampling events. So we had 50 sites, 2 different samples, and then in 2018, we bumped that up to 5 sets of samples over those 50-plus sites. And then this year, in 2019, we're repeating that. 5 samples over some sites across that those Huck 12 watersheds, or 5 Huck 12 watersheds. So, due to the nature of data collection and changing weather patterns and all of that, it may not be practical to use the information year to year, but what we're really are thinking this data is useful for is for the longer term and also help us identify spot target efforts. The next slide is just showing a similar sample for sediment. That's 2 of about 7 or 8 parameters that we monitor. So next slide. So a lot of times when we're presenting to farmers, they're asking us, hey, what are you doing in your city? So we always like to share what we're doing in our city for the same things that we're asking to be done on the watershed for due diligence about nutrient runoff or volume, et cetera. This is what we're doing in Cedar Rapids. In this urban environment, you're going to hear us talking about how we manage stormwater and decrease the impact of flash flooding. We've been very active in finalizing a stormwater master plan. We've invested quite a bit of dollars in updating that plan, and which helps us prioritize work in areas that have the most effect. And we're working on projects within watersheds within the city to increase stormwater retention and drainage basins. And we've seen a lot of success with a program that we have with our residential and commercial customers with cost share, stormwater cost share program. The city will cost share with someone who wants to install a practice, and in return, they get a reduced rate on their stormwater utility. So the photos here, you see one on the left is a bioswale that was installed in one of our city parks. The middle one is permeable pavers in an alley near Coe College here in Cedar Rapids. And then the one on the right is a bioretention cell that was built on a church lot. Next slide. The One Water. We know that water is our world's most precious resource, and it's essential to everything we do as a city, and that you all do in your cities as well, or wherever you are listening in from, and as individuals. Our residents rely on safe, clean, great-tasting drinking water. Our industry depends on the reliability of our water supply. Our economy runs on water. The agriculture that fuels a large part of the Cedar Rapids economy runs on water. Each of the stakeholders shown here have a different cause and effect relationship with water, and we recognize that if we tackle problems based on the complete life cycle of water and larger infrastructure systems, rather than limiting ourselves to our own piece of the equation, we can identify and advance more effective and lasting solutions. Next slide. At its heart, our One Water approach we believe in and that we practice is about diverse stakeholders coming together to advance common ground solutions to our water challenges. The strategies that we've examined illustrate the diversity and the growing sophistication of how we manage water in America and in our own watershed. And beyond the benefits we're focused on, flood resiliency and water quality improvement, our work has significant economic impact, and we see tremendous benefit from beginning the dialogue with farmers and conservation entities. Other private sector benefit we really want to point out is our ability to leverage project assistance from nonprofits like the Nature Conservancy and financial support from foundations like the Penn County Foundation. These groups see our commitment and our work and dedication, and they help us. They contribute to this success. So again, we feel Cedar Rapids is a true leader in the field, in this field of One Water concept, and we do well to represent the importance of an integrated, inclusive, and holistic approach. Every individual, every sector, every stakeholder group has a role to play. Water providers, farmers, industries, philanthropic organizations, watershed-based organizations, city and regional planners, landowners, developers, policymakers, regulators, and researchers, all of us have to work together if we're going to secure a sustainable water future for all. And for us in Cedar Rapids, sustainability, for us, farming fuels our economy. Water fuels farming. Beyond sustaining our residents, our water and wastewater treatment aids agricultural processing, which gives the market to our regional agriculture and to the people that live in our watershed and produce the grain that flows to our city. And questions, I understand, will be at the end. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mike, and really well said there at the end when we're talking about what One Water means and what examples of One Water look like and work. So next we're going to be turning to Deb Prabathke. Deb is a research associate professor at the School of Natural Resources at the University of Nebraska-Lincoln, and she also serves as an education and outreach coordinator with the National Drought Mitigation Center. So her bio is on the screen there, and Deb's going to be talking about a little bit different angle at the One Water approach, and that is using drought scenarios exercises as ways to bring different diverse audiences together to discuss drought and planning for lack of water or lack of water for industries as well as agricultural and citizens. So Deb, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Okay, so just for those of you who aren't familiar with our center, I thought I'd put up a quick overview. The National Drought Mitigation Center is housed at the University of Nebraska in Lincoln. We were established in 1995, and our mission is to help people and entities increase their resilience to drought. We do this by researching and promoting drought planning, monitoring, and through communication and education activities. So what are scenario exercises? Excuse me, I've got a little bit of a cold. Scenario-based exercises are activities used to engage communities and organizations in collaborative drought planning to help them prepare for and respond to the challenges associated with a hypothetical drought. In the activity shown in this exercise, which is actually a game, the participants had to respond to a pump failure of a municipal well, which led to a reduction of water supply to communities. So why would you want to use a scenario exercise for drought? Well, for those of us in the North Central region, we know that drought happens. And looking back at the drought history for the region, in the last 10 years alone, at least some part of the North Central region was in a severe or worse drought over 90% of the time. Droughts are costly. The numbers that I show here are primarily based on agricultural losses. And if we were to take the true effects of drought, those costs would be even higher. Normally when we think of drought, at least in our region, we think about those impacts to agriculture, but in fact, drought affects everyone. And the numbers I show here are based on a tool that we have called the Drought Impact Reporter, which, as you can see, it primarily captures those agricultural losses, but we also see other losses, including infrastructure damage, losses to tourism, public health factors, and so on. And then finally, planning for drought is complex. Drought and water, they don't follow political boundaries. And when we plan for it, we have to consider the actions from individuals all the way to any policies of a state or a nation. So the types of exercises that you can use to help engage people and to facilitate that collaborative planning, they vary in their approach, their objectives, the participants that are involved with it, and the complexity of the issues that you are addressing in the exercise. Typically, exercises are classified into what we call discussion-based exercises, which are shown on this slide, and then operations-based exercises, which involve the movement of people and equipment. So my focus is on the discussion-based exercises, and these include workshops, which for a scenario-based exercise, you would use a scenario to engage the participants in a discussion that is focused on collaborating to create a product, such as a specific section of a drought plan, or to generate options to deal with a challenge that you're facing in water management. There are also games, which, as the name implies, they use competition and rules and scoring and the discussion of a scenario to achieve certain parts of water management. Excuse me, to address and achieve certain components of water management. And then finally, we have tabletop exercises, which for this particular type of exercise, you need to have an existing plan. And these exercises are used to basically work through the implementation of the plan to help clarify roles and responsibilities. Selecting the right exercise requires the consideration of many different factors. It includes thinking about the planning stage that you're in. Do you have a plan in place, or are you starting from scratch? Who do you want to involve in the exercise? Do you want to open it up to a wide range of sectors and stakeholders, or do you want to focus on just agency or organizational staff. What do you hope to get out of the exercise? Do you want to promote systems thinking, education, training? Do you want to brainstorm creative solutions or other things like that? And I think one of the most important deciding factors is what are the resources that you have available to you? What can you commit in terms of money, in terms of staff time and technology to developing your exercise? Developing an exercise requires a team and a time commitment. We've divided it into 4 general stages. So the first is the concept phase, where you do your needs assessment and you decide which type of exercise you're going to use and what you will focus on. The planning stage, where you develop your work plans and you coordinate your logistics and you figure out what resources you commit. The design phase, which this is the one that the time and money really influences, where the complexity really influences the time and the money that's required for this stage. So it includes developing an evaluation plan, creating the scenarios, and coming up with all the materials you need for the exercise. So if you have if you're wanting an exercise that uses watershed modeling and maybe includes very quantified options for mitigation or for the risks and the trade-offs or economic analysis, that will take more time and will take more money to create something like that. And then the final stage would be delivering the exercise, having some orientation so people know what to expect, holding the event, and then evaluating and reporting out on the event. We've had a lot of interest in holding and communities holding exercises to help with drought planning. And so we started out with this guide that I think we initially called So You Want to Hold a Drought Tournament or something like that. And we began compiling the research, the evaluations that we had from different exercises and best practices into a reference document that will, I'm not sure it's online yet, but it will be very soon. And if you want it sooner, I can certainly email it to you. This document is rather long. I think with everything in it, it's probably close to 80 pages. And for the most part, people aren't going to sit down and read through 80 pages of material. So we were fortunate enough through the Water Network to receive funding to help transform this document into an interactive extension guide. And it will include worksheets to help with the selection and the planning process, as well as some multimedia case studies to show the experiences of other communities. As part of that grant, we've partnered with extension folks from several different states. They're all listed here. So they're part of our team that will be taking the guide and making it into an interactive version. But another part of the grant is to hold a workshop where we take people through the guide, and also that we run through some mock exercises of the different types to help increase familiarity with those. So if you are on this webinar and you're interested in being part of that process, we will have money to pay for travel, I think for 10 or so extra people to attend that workshop. So you can let me know, and my email is there if you're interested. And with that, I'm finished.
All right, thank you very much, Deb. Appreciate it. Sharing a little bit about your exciting project on ramping up or enhancing that drought planning guide for extension staff and other folks that work with communities. So now on to some questions and answers. We do have a few questions here in the chat box. The first question is for Mike. It's from Mike Tate, who says, Mike, you indicated a need for 75% watershed BMP coverage. Is that based on a mix of BMPs, or could the percentage go up and down depending on the practices utilized?
Yeah, that percentage is a mix of BMPs, and Iowa State does a lot of work in this regard. Iowa State is one of our universities here in Iowa, and so that's some of their numbers. And so it's just saying that the acres, the row crop acres in those watersheds, around 75% of them need to have some sort of a nutrient holding strategy on them, whether that's cover crops, a bioretention cell at the end of a tile line, a saturated buffer, a wetland where it makes sense. All of those things is sort of a conglomerate number.
Okay, great. Thank you. We have a question from Peggy. Peggy, I might need a little bit more information for your questions. It says it would be nice to know what the financial output to ensure potable water. Maybe you can note specifically who you were curious who the question was for in the chat box. In the meantime, we'll go to a question from Justin, and we'll circle back to Peggy here. This question is also for Mike. What economic benefits have you seen in the agrarian communities of these watersheds that you discussed today, besides the monies, beyond the monies injected from the federal government and partners? So another way is, how have the farmers directly benefited from implementing these management and structural practices that you talked about today?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. You know, we're 4 years into this. We've learned a lot. There's been some farmer champions in the watershed that were doing some of these practices before we ever showed up on the scene. But and so some of those farmers who've been practicing using these practices indicate economic benefit of doing the practices, both from, let's say in the like for cover crops and or no-tilling, they are saying they're having economic benefit because they need to make less trips across the field. They use less inputs from a fertilizer standpoint, and they're holding their yields. So they've got less input costs and and the same amount of crop benefit. So they're having more return for the dollar invested. And so those are some of the benefits that they are telling us about, and that we, of course, share that. And then the economic impact there for the farmer, I think that's emerging. There's a lot of studies going on. Iowa State is also helping on that realm, trying to quantify what, let's say, like you're using these practices and you're noticing an increased soil health benefit, increased organic matter in your soil. What is that worth? There's studies trying to figure out what is that worth in the long-term value of that piece of property, of that field, to have that increased soil health and that increased soil benefit. And they're getting close to putting some sort of a number to that. So all of that is exciting. It all helps us tell the story. It all helps us talk to farmers and discuss. It's an economic deal. I mean, they're using that land. They have to make a living on it. They're raising families. They're making a living, but they want to do the right thing. Many of them do, and they understand our concerns, and they understand the need for that clean water. They understand the need for nitrates not to be in the surface water. So it's been exciting to be involved.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question, Justin, and great to hear that the producers you're working with are indeed, seeing that they're keeping those nutrients in fields as a result of the practices. It looks like Peggy got back to us, and this question was directed for Lorraine. So, Lorraine, would you be able to provide any information in terms of the finances involved in some of the projects that you were working on?
Well, I know that with our RCPP project, the most recent one, we've calculated that as a $2 million project that required about $100,000 from the city of Columbus, in addition to other matching services that we're able to support in order to get that $2 million. But I think the question overall on how much money it costs to produce potable water, we're talking tens of millions of dollars. It was nearly $40 million to install ion exchange, which is only used to reduce nitrates. So that really does, in our minds, justify taking a look at what $40 million could do upstream as far as implementing and installing BMPs. The thing is, though, with nitrates, utilities don't really have the option. When we are in violation of a nitrate level, we have to have the option to take it out. So that's why, based on where Columbus was at the time, we chose to invest in an ion exchange. But what we are thinking about now is, as our service population grows, and as we look at a fourth water plant, will we install ion exchange there? And if so, at what capacity? So that's why it's a balancing act between investment in the watershed and investment in infrastructure. But really, I mean, to run a water utility, we're talking millions of dollars, and it's not just in treatment technology, it's in our upgrades to the distribution system. And we're trying to do that, at a very cost-effective rate so we keep water affordable.
Right. Absolutely. Thanks, Lorraine. And thanks for that question, Peggy. I think that really helps put it in perspective of why working with upstream partners can be so effective, especially when looking at that financial trade-off there. We have a question from Rima here. Rima says, it's sometimes difficult to get people to participate in water-related planning meetings in my area since water quantity is generally sufficient. So people see it as a non-issue. When it comes to stakeholder collaboration, did you have any difficulty getting people to the table? And if so, what did you do about it? I think this question is most likely for Deb, and that's a great question, is because when drought's not happening, oftentimes we're not thinking about it, right?
Sorry,
Deb,
I had to turn on my microphone. I started talking without it. Yes, it can be difficult to get people together, but the time to do it is when you are not in a drought and you're not under the emergency of a current drought situation. And one thing that I didn't mention, I spoke about these exercises in terms of drought, but they can be used for all different types of hazards. And in 2016, we were actually part of a collaboration with the Corps of Engineers and the U.S. Geological Survey and the city of Cedar Rapids to hold a multi-hazard tournament, so a gaming exercise that focused on drought, flooding, and water quality issues. So, and I think the other thing to point out too is that if you've had a recent drought, that's the time to use the momentum from that while it's still fresh in people's mind to get them to come together.
Right, that's a good point. I'm gonna see that I don't see any other questions from the audience, but we could get a few more here. So I'm gonna ask a question of my own that I have and see if anyone has a last question for our speakers before while we're addressing this. So my question is for Mike. Mike, I thought it was interesting that you noted working with Iowa Soybean, one of our strong partners, is really helpful in helping you kind of understand the landscape a little bit, coming in from a water utility perspective. One thing that's curious to me is, being more from an agricultural perspective, what are some of the things that were really helpful for you to know coming, if it was this agricultural audience, saying what's helpful for water utilities to know when talking about these sort of upstream partnerships?
I think the thing that struck us the most was the complexity of what a farmer is facing each year when he's trying to make a living on the ground, on the land. It's just incredible what all of the decisions that person has to make when they're getting ready to plant a crop. And I think that was a realization to us that this is something that even if they want to do the right thing, they have so many decisions to make that some of those, water quality it's important to them, but it's sort of like, but I got to make a living, I got to survive. So I think the thing that we learned the most was just the complexity they face each and every year they're putting a crop in. And so we knew that we didn't want to try to be antagonistic or be a barrier to them. So Iowa State helped us just learn how to come have conversations and, you know, broach the subject. How you doing on the land? How you doing with your crops? You know, approach it more conversational than adversarial, and just learn what they have to do, and then tell them what we have to do, what we're concerned with. And so that was kind of, I feel like that's kind of the spirit of how they helped us approach it.
Interesting. Yeah, that's great to know. And I think it also, you know, you're showing that this is also an understanding exercise from both sides, and both kind of learning from one another as well, which, as we know, often see as a key to success. So thanks so much for sharing that. And thanks so much to all of our speakers. Their email addresses is up on the screen. I know specifically with Deb, if you're interested in getting involved with the drought scenario planning workshop, reach out to her. But if you have additional questions for any of our speakers, their contact information is up there. And we will also be posting a recording of this call, or excuse me, of this webinar on our website, northcentralwater.org. And we will also be posting the PDF of these slides, should anyone want to look at those over or share those with those that weren't able to join us today. So with that, I want to thank all of our speakers, and thank you all for attending today's webinar. We do have another upcoming webinar I want to make you all aware of. We do have a webinar coming up this coming Monday, August 26th, and that's brought to you by our climate team, many of which are involved in Deb's project on drought scenario planning. And that webinar is on adaptation resources for agriculture, a tool for assisting agricultural producers in adapting to climate variability and change. And you can register for that webinar at northcentralclimate.org/webinars. So thank you to our speakers, and thanks so much, everyone, for joining us today. Have a great day.